Hello. Isn't this wonderful? Oh, it's so good to see all of you, and it's such an honor to be here with all of you on this special day, Veterans Day, and the 100th anniversary of the centennial. It's a centennial of World War I. Isn't that amazing? 100 years. You know, I was sitting back here, I see all these children and all these veterans, and I was thinking, you know, I'm getting old. But I'm kind of lucky at the same time. Because as a young girl, a teenager, I got to talk to World War I veterans. I lived in Tacoma. I grew up in Tacoma. My dad was a World War II veteran. And the gentleman at the bottom of the hill where I lived, Major Hawker, was a pilot in World War I. And he always let me come in his house and look at his pictures of his airplanes. They were big kites with great big engines on the front. That's what it looked like to me. And I loved them. And he said, I served in the Great War. Every time he was around my dad and the other veterans, he would say, you served in World War II, and I served in the Great War. So I grew up calling it the Great War. Now, the mayor that spoke at the beginning of the program, he mentioned there were 4 million men that served in the Great War. 4 million men. That's a lot 100 years ago. Think about it. There was only about a fourth of the people in the United States then than there are today. 4 million men. So when all those men left, what did the women do, ladies? They did exactly the same thing that women did in World War II. They went to the factories. They replaced the men in the factories. They delivered milk. They delivered the mail. They farmed the land. They did everything the women did. You know, we don't think about that very often, do we? Those ladies in their boots, their ankle boots and their long skirts, they got up in the morning and delivered the milk. They did everything the men were doing. Not to mention the 45,000 women in U.S. military uniform. I brought the display today over there. Those are all original U.S. military uniforms. How many knew that women served in World War I? I guess that's pretty good. 45,000. Did you know that 22,000 Army nurses served? 22,000 Army nurses. 10,000 went overseas, everywhere. They served everywhere. 12,000 served here at home. The ones in France served around the clock. They had 33 men apiece to take care of. And think about it, no antibiotics back then. There were no antibiotics. Very little pain medication. And all these wonderful things like intravenous feedings and things were just coming about. So these women worked around the clock. And as far as supplies go, I mean, when you're bandaging men 3 times a day and cleaning them, you run out of bandages fast, don't you? And all your supplies come by ship. So what do when you run out of bandages? You wash them. So when you're not nursing, you're washing bedding, you're washing bandages, you're stretching those bandages over bandage stretchers. So you've got an awful lot of work to do. And what else are they fighting? Trying to take care of the men. We had a pandemic going on, didn't we? So we had a lot of complications from that. So those nurses had a big, big job. 1,200 of those nurses died from enemy attack, influenza, and just plain exhaustion. I have a history over there called, her name is Miss Mary Stewart. She served in France for 9 months. When she was on her way, she wrote in her diary, she wrote as she was going on a ship overseas. She said, "Here I am on a ship. I'm going to a country I never really thought about before. I'm getting paid less than I did when I was a student nurse, and on top of everything else, I'm seasick." That was amazing. When you read about these women's history, it's just amazing. 15,000 women served in the Navy. They were yeoman Fs, yeoman female. See that poster over there on the table? It says, "Gee, if I were a man, I'd join the Navy." When Bernice Tongate went to join the Navy, the Navy recruiters didn't believe her. They said, "We're not taking women." She said, "Oh, yes, you are. You're taking women." She got in a big fight with the recruiters. Finally, the recruiting artist walked out and he said, "Ooh, I like this woman's spunk, and she's awfully cute. Let's put her on a stool and paint her picture." And you know, that's where that poster came from. And did you know that she's a native Washingtonian? Did you know she lived and died at the Retzel Soldiers Home in Port Orchard at the age of 93. But you know, when she finally convinced him she could join the Navy, right? She did, and she loved being in the Navy. Well, she served until the end of World War I, and when World War II rolled around, she wanted to be in the Navy again. So she went to the Navy recruiting office, and they told her she was just too old to serve in the Navy at that time. That never stopped Bernice. She just went right next door and joined the Army. She served in World War II as a WAC. You know, isn't that amazing? These women in World War I did what we needed them to do, to help with their country, right? And we have Hello Girls. Have you ever heard of the Hello Girls? They were part of the Signal Corps, the Army Signal Corps. General Pershing, when he got over to France, he couldn't speak French. He said, "We're the only country that really isn't speaking French, so we need French-speaking people in our Signal Corps." Well, he got women. He got women. He enlisted women in the Signal Corps to translate French to English and English to French. And it was not really probably the best offer. You could join the Army, you could be sworn into the Signal Corps, but then you had to pay for your own uniforms, you had to pay for your trip to France, and you had to have a college education to join the Army Signal Corps as women. So it probably wasn't the most enticing thing, but you know, thousands of women turned out for that, to go overseas. It was amazing. They were a big part of our defense, and they were right there on the front lines often, in their big long skirts, and of course, General Pershing was very concerned that their skirts might blow up, so these women had to wear big black bloomers under their skirts, just in case. But they were wonderful soldiers, and they were all very proud of their service. There were 300 Marine Corps women recruiting in World War I. 300 Marines. You know, and their uniforms were just as snappy back then as they are today. The Marine Corps, they really kind of figured things out after a while. They decided that they had some attractive women that could recruit men, attract young men. See, young men will follow attractive women anywhere, and pretty much right into the recruiting office. So that worked really well. Well, 45,000 women, Navy nurses, Army nurses, Marines, Hello Girls, they were in our armed forces. They did their job, and they didn't ask for much. You know, one thing I always want to remind you, women have a always been there. They have always been there. Whatever trouble we've had in this country, women are always there to help. Thank you so much.